I've been teasing it for a few videos now, and now we're finally here. 25 cars which are hidden in plain sight, if you will, or more so, I believe they might be teased in plain sight in Gran Turismo 7, which are not in the game. But one of these in particular gives me even more impetus to make the list, because as soon as I wrote down these vehicles, which were initially 28, a couple of them I don't think are really that likely at all, but I'm going to give them a passing mention anyway. And the reason why I'm absolutely doing this list is because one of them is now in the game. One of them arrived in the most recent update, which, if nothing else, certainly gives more credence to this idea. It certainly doesn't make it absolutely set in stone, so don't get your hopes up too much, but I would not be surprised at all if more than a few of these do arrive either in GT7 or perhaps as day one vehicles in whatever the next game is. And some of you actually guessed what this was going to be. I said as much. I thought there was no way nobody else had noticed this, and that is of course the channel section. In each dealership in the game, at least most of them, you have a selection of embedded YouTube videos. None of the manufacturers have a ton of these videos. They tend to be 2 or 3 at the most typically, but they choose some oddly specific vehicles. And Honda chose the FL5 Civic, which has just arrived in the game. And that alone is the one that I was talking about earlier on when I said I believe this really does give it so much more credence than just a passing glance. The fact that that was in the channel section, specifically chosen for a video, and is now in the game, that certainly piques my interest. Now, some of these I don't think do have a huge chance, and that kicks us off first of all with Ford. The Ford Rally 1 Puma. Alternative power as far as rally cars go. I don't think this one has the highest chances on the list. We haven't seen much love at all for rally, which to be honest is one of the main reasons why I feature so many rally builds in the special project series each month, because I think it's a sorely lacking part of the game with so much potential there. And aside from stuff like the, Escudo? I can't even think of another example aside from that. I'm sure we've had some other rally car at some point, but that's the only one that comes to mind. And I mean, how many people actually use the Escudo for rally? I feel like most players use it on the tarmac anyway, so they don't give enough love to rally, which makes me think this one probably has less of a chance. The next one, this one certainly has a decent chance because we've already got the base vehicle. In the Chevy dealer, there is a video for the C8 Z06 Corvette. Of course, we have the Stingray. It was the most requested car that people wanted in the game, probably the only thing higher than the Lexus LFA, at least from what I've seen. A Z06, of course, much like a Z06 of a previous generation, and certainly the ZR1, it's that much quicker already. Doubtless it'll be quicker with tuning as well, so I would say that out of this entire list, this one's probably got a reasonably good chance. At the same time though, as I said in another video recently, I could 100% see a C8 Z06 not arriving in this game, but being a trailer car for the next one. You know, that's exactly the kind of car that they would have in the trailer, and it wouldn't actually surprise me if they had it as a cover car. The next one is a very interesting one. I think the chances are super low, to be honest, for this game, but again, this brings up something that we've talked about before. The Jaguar electric Formula car. This is a curious one, because we've talked about Formula E before, and it was supposed to, I can't even remember the details, it was at least rumoured or talked about, I think Kaz might have even spoken about it arriving in the game. The question that I would like you folks to think about in the comments, and I would really be curious to think what the consensus is here, let's say it does happen, and I do not think this is going to arrive in this game, but I could again 100% see Formula E being a day one thing for the next game. It certainly would be a draw for some people, again in the trailers. But do you think they would do this? Because spoiler alert, this Jaguar is the only Formula E car on this list. So do you think if they were to bring Formula E, would they only have the Jaguar and do essentially what they did with the Tickford, you know, the V8 supercar that we used to have in Gran Turismo, where it was the only thing of its kind in the game? Or would that just be a teaser of having more teams? Of course, that would be ideal, you know, Maserati and various others would be awesome, but I could actually see them kind of doing the Tickford thing, which would be unfortunate. But yeah, the next couple are both from the McLaren dealership, the Artura and the 765 Longtail. You know, a ton of players would be really happy to see that one. The next one is one which I actually could see coming in this game. I don't think people would be that bothered by it, which is kind of a shame. It's one of those brands that you either really like it or never use it at all. Radical. Radical actually has a video on the SR10, of course updated over the Radical that we have in the game. The one that we already have, I would say, is kind of good enough. I would much rather they did the Forza approach, which is to have something completely different, like a Radical RXC. At least that's a genuinely totally different caliber of car, whereas this one, it feels a bit samey. Not to put that past Polyphony, they've certainly done variations and similar things before, so it could well happen, and I do think this one has a better chance of any on the list of possibly coming in one of this game's updates, but we'll have to wait and see. Ultimately, I could certainly see them having this instead of the current one in the next title. That's certainly a possibility. The next one is a classic for sure, a bit of an intriguing one as well. Doesn't get as much chatter as some of their more iconic classics, but the BMW dealership features a video about the Turbo. The BMW Turbo is one of their most striking looking cars, and at least from the front, it's definitely up there with stuff like the Nazca in terms of being like the ultimate BMW supercar. The M1 is the only one that reached production in terms of being a proper BMW supercar, and it's not even that much of a supercar. It's more like a super sports car, really. Great for racing, of course, but I personally never liked it that much. The Turbo, on the other hand, it is a striking looking car. It's a bit Marmite from the back, but from the front, it's pretty incredible looking, and again, could well be some kind of collector's piece. The fact that it's more of a prototype or a concept, I do think gives it less of a chance, and we're going to come back to that concept in a second, the concept of concepts. Another BMW that is featured though, and I would be pretty happy to see this one, an 8 Series Gran Coupe. Oddly specific to have a video about that exact car. I think that could be an interesting one. So yeah, I think this one, like the Radical, probably more so than the Radical, has a damn good chance of coming in an update, or possibly again being in the next game. The next one is one of only a couple on the list, which I'm giving more of a passing mention to, because I've noticed that Polyphony is not giving very much love at all to concept cars these days. There are one or two, but it's nothing like it used to be. The Vision GT program has kind of replaced that, which I think is a shame, because for many of us, even myself included, as a fan of some of the VGTs, I would choose mostly concept cars over those. And some of them were fan favourites. The Chevy Silverado, the Suzuki Concept S2 and the GSX-R4. There were tons of great concept cars. Now there are some, Mazda RX-500 for example, but not that many. Certainly not as many as there used to be, which is why this one's only getting a passing mention, the Audi Skysphere concept. There's a video for it. I really don't give this one much credence at all, because it's way too close to being a Vision GT, which kind of makes it feel redundant. The next one though is another electric vehicle. This one though, I could see him doing, the Mini, the electric Mini. And of course, I actually talked about the electric Mini technically recently on the channel. I did a video that barely anyone has watched, because of course, about how to save Marcos as a brand, how to bring back one of my favourite brands and have them, stick around. The best chance of Marcos to stick around as a brand, and spoiler alert, the way I said to do it was to rebirth the Marcos Mini based on the electric Mini platform. This one I could see happening, because it's one of those cars which is, it's pretty attainable, in terms of mapping it into the game. Plus, of course, Mini would love the exposure, sell more vehicles, because it's not the cheapest thing in the world. So yeah, I could see that one having a decent chance, even though, ironically, most people probably wouldn't care less if that were in the game or not. The next couple, though, well, we go to the other extreme, because I know a lot of you would be really damn happy with these two from the Lamborghini dealership, because the first one is the STO version of the Huracan. This I could easily see being featured, but think about this for a second. You've clicked on the trailer for Gran Turismo 8, and the first thing you see is a C8 Z06 and a Huracan STO battling on like Willow Springs, or Deep Forest, or Trial Mountain, or maybe some returning track like El Capitan. You know as well as I do, you could 100% see that being a trailer car. So once again, I think it has a damn good chance, but whether or not it's in this game, I'm not so sure on that. The next one, I personally really don't care for. I find it quite a boring and gimmicky car, but I know a ton of people really seem to love it. The Countach. The new Countach, the LPI 800, the newer shape, basically a Ventador with a different skin on it Countach, which is part of the reason why I don't care for it, but a ton of people seem to really love this thing, and yeah, of course I could see this being a part of the game. They have definitely favoured Lamborghini in the past couple of games. They've had a pretty decent selection from what could easily be a fairly overlooked brand. So yeah, I could easily see both of those happening. Speaking of Italian supercars though, because of course that's the realm of manufacturers that we're still in, this one I would be really happy for, and it would certainly find good ground and good rivalries with stuff like the Ferrari FXXK, the Aston Valkyrie kind of, and even the McLaren P1 GTR, because this is the Pagani dealership, because they feature the Huayra R. And I know a lot of you who would be really happy to see a Huayra R in the game. The Zonda R is already very good, somewhat underused, but very good. The Huayra is a superb choice of straight line road car, that's for damn sure. This one would be, I think, extremely popular. It would probably also be fairly expensive, at least 3 million credits I could see, if not more. So yeah, I mean, I sure as hell hope this one does come to Gran Turismo. Again, could easily see it being held over for a next game, and if this were to arrive in GT7, I don't think they'd have waited this long to put it in an update, so I could see it being in the next game. Speaking of Pagani though, this one I actually could see them bringing to this game, because they feature the Zonda C12, the original Zonda, the far less powerful, around 388 I believe it is horsepower, 6 litre V12 version, essentially Horatio's concept car, which he already put into production I believe before even showing the concept. He was that confident that people would love it, and he was absolutely right. Pagani should have failed, and most companies like that do, but they've flourished, much like Koenigsegg, and yeah, I could easily see him bringing this one back. And even though, of course, I talked recently about how the 7.3 C12S would make more sense, but this one is more historically significant, being the original, so I could see them for sure bringing this one in a GT7 patch. We've already had stuff like the 959, the XJ220, this of course is a bit newer, but still, I could certainly see this one coming in GT7. The next one is a gorgeous classic, and again, if it arrives, this is a couple of vehicles which show even more love to my favourite brand, Maserati. The first one being a Maserati A6 1500. Maserati's had an interesting mix, because there still aren't a ton of them in the game, but we've gone from having one for many years to now having a pretty damn nice selection of classics and modern, even with the shockingly modern MC20. The next one that's featured in the Maserati dealer is the GT hybrid version of the Ghibli. Now, the Ghibli is very mixed. I know many of you do not like the car. Personally, I don't really like it either. I haven't driven one in real life yet. Of course, I have plenty of experience with Quattroportes myself. The Ghibli, it's just too Chrysler for me. I'm not a fan really of any of Maserati's latest stuff. The Levante, the new Quattroporte, the Ghibli, they're too Fiat Chrysler. They're not Ferrari enough, because they're not Ferrari anymore. And I think that's kind of a problem. They've lost some of the soul, for me at least. The next one is, well, if the Toyota that we've already had is anything to go by, certainly one of the ones which I think has a damn good chance, and one of the ones which I would definitely love to see, perhaps even number one on the whole list, the Peugeot 9X8, Peugeot's current wingless hypercar. The Toyota's fine. I rarely ever use it because I prefer the GT1 and LMP1 kind of era, the LMP 900s, which we have virtually none of at the moment. This one though is probably up there with the Cadillac in terms of being my two favourite current hypercars. I love the two brands, I love supporting them, and the Peugeot I love as well because it's so radically different. It's thinking outside of the box. It's the kind of thing that makes me love the Nismo front-wheel drive LM car. It's the whole reason why I support Panos, because it's different, it's unashamed, unabashed, it's oddball, and it tries something unique, and I love it for that. Plus Peugeot makes some fantastic Le Mans cars, 905, 908, and of course this one as well. The next one is still French, of course, not exactly on the same level as a 9X8 though, the Citroën Ami, or Amy, sure. I mean, again, I could see them actually bringing this one to the game, because if you look back through the Gran Turismo titles, they actually have featured weird little things like this a few times. Probably the most notable example being that little Toyota pod that was in one of the, what was it, prologues, I think? Probably the closest thing to something like this that we've had would be in Gran Turismo 6, where we had the Mitsubishi Miev, the iMiev, we had the concept, which was in a couple of games, and then the actual, for some reason, full premium version with a body kit even that you could put on it. So there is a precedent for these weird little Super Mini type things to be in the game, so I could see that one happening, but I mean, can you imagine how people would react if this was in one of the 3 car updates? I mean, some people would probably love it, but I think there would be pandemonium in the streets if they added this little thing as one of the 3 cars. The next one is technically kind of a Citroen. It's a DS though, a much cooler one, the E-Tense. I mean, yet again, Citroen showing us what they can do, but for some reason keep choosing not to in making these awesome concept cars like the GT by Citroen, aka the original Vision GT in some cases, or in some ways. The problem is, I've put a ring around this one on the list for the exact same reason as the Audi. It's a concept car. Could it arrive? Sure. Would I like it to? Absolutely. This would be awesome. But I just don't think it has that much of a chance. Concept cars, there's no point in going through my points that I said earlier on again. I just don't think it has that much of a chance. The next one is a much simpler one. This one I think is kind of a shame because you can sort of build this yourself already, but it is a brand that they give a surprising amount of love to given how small they are. Alpine, the Alpine A110S. Like I said, it makes sense. Sure, I guess if they added it in an update, I really wouldn't care. You can kind of build it yourself in the game anyway. It's not spot on, but it's close enough. But sure, I could actually see this one being quite likely, funnily enough. The next one is much cooler though, in my opinion. I'm not a huge fan personally of the KTM Crossbow, but these two would be very cool. The GTX or GT2 versions of the Crossbow are featured in their dealership, and they are not just badass looking cars, the Darth Vader of KTM cars, but they're properly quick as well. This thing would have, I believe, some issues with maybe where they would place them. The GT2 I'm sure could be fitted into a category more easily, but the GTX I'm not so sure. I mean, either way it would be cool to have some more KTMs to work with, because the one that we have is, you either love it or you don't. I don't, I never have. Again, I could see this being like a next game kind of thing though. This one I find quite curious because it's a vehicle which I don't think we've actually seen in full yet. We've only seen the test mule version, and actually that would be kind of a cool throwback, especially to Gran Turismo 5 and 6, if they were to feature that test mule in the game. It's from a dealership that they love. It is immediately useful for Group 3 racing, and we have had, like I said, test vehicles before. We've had the test mules of GTRs with the mask, we had the fully masked C7 Corvette in Gran Turismo 5 and 6, so there is a precedent there, and it is of course the Toyota GR GT3 test car. If they were to add it as an unfinished test car, like with that covered mule paint, that would also be pretty cool. And I could definitely see them doing something like that because they love Toyota so much. If they were to maybe wait a bit longer though and have the whatever revealed version, I could 100% see them doing that as well. With this one, I think it's a matter of when, not if. I do 100% think that this car is coming to Gran Turismo, if not in this game, definitely in the next one. It's just too obvious, of course it's going to be. The next one was the Honda FL5. Once again, one of the reasons why I doubled down on making the list, because it was featured right there in front of our faces, and then boom, it's right there in an update. So moving right along, we have Mazda. Mazda features the Cosmo in their dealership. I talked of course recently about the 110S, the Cosmo, in terms of their chances. I certainly do think that Mazda has plenty of room for featuring more of their old school models in there, classics or just retro. There's so much unmined potential with Mazda that used to be in the franchise but just isn't for whatever reasons anymore. They've gone very safe with most of their Mazda choices, much newer stuff like the Atenza and the later MX-5. The next one, again, I could easily see happening. I think it's probably pretty certain to happen at some point. The 2022 shape Subaru WRX. Especially since we're now, I believe, seeing some early access reviews of, the current Impreza RS, I think they're calling it now, instead of the STI. Yeah, again, this one's such an obvious choice, it would seem stupid for it not to be high on the list in terms of its likelihood. Again, I think like the Toyota, this is more a matter of when, not if. This next one was one of the ones which I noticed first, and actually kind of gave me the idea to look into the different dealerships and make this list. from Lexus, the Lexus IS500F Sport. Now don't get me wrong, it's no ISF. It may be quicker, it may be more efficient, but it's still not an ISF. And of course, I love the ISF, and as I said before, I really want to review one in real life. I would choose the ISF, and most people of course would choose the LFA, but the IS500F Sport is the one showcased. Again, that is a very specific car to feature if you have no plans to have it in the game. That's weirdly specific, so I could definitely see this one arriving in future. I think the problem with adding this is if they were to add this before an LFA, I think people would be so disappointed that it's not an LFA that they would override noticing it or almost like refusing to like it, which I think would be a shame because it doesn't deserve that. I'm sure it's a fantastic car, so I think this one's more about Polyphony getting the timing right. They must add the LFA before adding this, because otherwise, like I said, I think it will get overshadowed. The next one is interestingly another pretty specific choice of classic, and in fact both of the last ones are. This one is from Suzuki, the original first generation 1970 Suzuki Jimny. I could so easily see this one coming. We've had the Willys Jeep in the past, it's a fan favourite, we've still got it, it's got some pretty mad upgrades that you can do to it as well, and yeah, I mean, it's a natural rival for it, kind of, not really, but sort of, maybe you could, and yeah, I mean, why not? It's one of those cars which I wouldn't really care if they didn't add it, but if they did, I'm sure it would be fun. And the last one is kind of a car which reminds me of my own Gran Turismo 6 returning lists that I've made, because even though I didn't feature this one, in the Mitsubishi dealership, they do show off a car which used to be in Gran Turismo. In fact, it was in a bunch of games. The classic 1600cc Lancer GSR. We had the road version, which I barely ever saw anyone using, and the rally version in that iconic white with the black bonnet. I think either of those would be a cool addition. The rally of course would make more sense, but once again, as I said at the start of the video, rally really isn't getting that much love generally speaking, so again, I could see this one being maybe in the next game. If it is the rally version, and if it does arrive in this game, I wouldn't actually be annoyed by that. I think that would be pretty cool, because it is a slightly less obvious choice from Mitsubishi, but certainly one which is very, very crucial to their history and their heritage. You know it would be in the Haggerty collection, of course, and justifiably so. It would be a lovely little collector's piece and probably pretty damn good on the road as well. And if I recall correctly, I think even the rally version was rear-wheel drive, so a bit of a different approach. Could be a nice little rival for the Stratos, maybe, if you tune it up as well. But that's it overall for the full 28 vehicles technically, but if you take out the DS E-Tense and the Audi Skysphere, because I don't think their chances are very high at all, and of course we have to take off the Honda because cha-ching, it has arrived already, that leaves us of course with 25. So what do you think? Do you think these are just happenstance? Do you think it's just marketing? Personally, I strongly believe that these are teasers hidden in plain sight that also have the benefit of marketing as well. If it is just a marketing thing, they're just, like I said a number of times, they're too specific. Like, they're such strangely, oddly specific choices of car that I don't buy that they're just happenstance or random, especially when each manufacturer only has a couple of videos. There are so many other videos you could have done if it were just a marketing thing. So give me your thoughts down below, and of course, if new ones pop up in these dealers, which could happen, I'm not sure if that's happened in updates in the past, I think it probably has, I haven't noticed, but it could be interesting to see if there are any added. Maybe it's something else that we'll have to check after each update, but of course, stick around on the channel to see if any of these do arrive. It'll be very fun to tick them off in a very leaked data mining list kind of way if they do arrive. And like I said, technically we can tick off the Honda already, so that's a good start. So stick around on the channel for more videos like this, and of course I'll see you next time. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.